Thanks, man. Hey, everybody. I couldn't have hoped for a better introduction. Really humbled. Thank you, Dave. Uh, so, what I want to talk about today is how Web3 ecosystems and protocols evolve and what lessons can we take from it and apply it to the multi-chain thesis. The thesis that states that if we want to see mass adoption of Web3, we need to be more welcoming to people, trying to keep a certain level of sovereignty while they take their baby steps into creating their own blockchain networks. Uh, First of all, I must say thank you to all the wonderful students we had a couple of weeks ago in Petnica at the science research facility that's pointed towards students and high schoolers, together with Tenderly and Decenter. We did that thing, and I'm very happy that a lot of them attended this conference. The students that we had, and this presentation is really influenced by the talks that we had during those 7 days with the students at Petnica. So big kudos for them for asking the right questions. A bit about myself. So I'm a tech guy. I did system engineering and GoDaddy. Later on, I was the engineering lead at MVP Workshop. And 2 years ago, I got the opportunity to co-found Trapezis and act as a CTO, where we developed a blockchain client for Polygon called Polygon SDK, then Polygon Edge. And we were happy to release Polygon Supernets, the app chain program that we first had touch with. Uh, Although this talk, in essence, lists all the things that pushed us forward to create Route 3, this talk has no intention to shill Route 3, but rather to give you all some insights from the industry, from our experience building app chains and helping organizations adopt app chains so that many more of us can start building things for the next wave of adoption, and not just building things for the cool new L1, but building stuff so that mass adoption can really happen. I hope that you will find these insights valuable. So the approach that we had when we started developing Polygon Edge was that we treated it as an enterprise blockchain client. What it meant is that we needed to cater to the needs of people who really didn't know much about Web3, both from how they will utilize it, how they will capture value from it, and what do they need to look out for in terms of technological capabilities of these networks. This was, in essence, every sales call that I had with the enterprises. The one thing that these guys knew very well that they needed to pay attention to, what is the scale of operation that I can have in this network that I can call my own? I know what my current transactions per second are, and I need to make sure that the network that I'm going to be deploying on can facilitate my target TPS. As an engineering team, what we did, we put this to the top of our priorities, prioritizing TPS over everything else. And to be honest, the enterprises themselves, they really took, they didn't take anything for granted. They went and started exploring the industry, learned the ropes of Web3, and I must say that I was very happy to how diligent people were when they were making this kind of choices. But even though we really managed to hit TPS numbers we didn't thought we could, even though the enterprises were happy and they imagined that once they have a network deployed for themselves with a decentralized validator set or not, that this is how they would celebrate. They would be ready to start deploying, users will start coming, and all will be good. But the hard truth came immediately after, and that truth was that in order to really have what you can call a fully functioning blockchain network, it's not just the network, it's not just the users, but it's a list of huge list of services that you need to provide to your users so that they can have the same list, the same UX as in rest of Web3. You would need a block explorer. Nobody would trust a transaction gets executed unless the person is an engineer, can interface with a JSON RPC, but no, you need to give your users a way to track the execution and finality of transactions. If you're offering a bridge, you need a nice UI around the bridge. You need to have good ways of informing the users about the movement of their funds and the security of their funds. You need an RPC provider. If you want other people to deploy on your network, you need an Oracle service for off-chain data, fiat on-ramps, development tooling. The list is even longer, but these are the most common 6 services that people demand in their networks and that they really cannot do well and state, I have a blockchain network of my own without having these things. The cost of these things is humongous. The business models that we see in Web3 of today is that we are creating this big tooling silos oriented towards large networks. I could have been treated as a really having a really highly valued startup if I just decided to be the first one to develop tooling for a very specific L1 network, which is not that lucrative. You're depending on the success of that L1 network, and you cannot really easily support new ones. Thus, the big prices. For example, for a block explorer, which is high in quality, which is battle tested, you need about 4 months to integrate, and you need to put aside $1 million just to be able to pay for it for 1 year. But let's put that aside. Let's go back to the decentralization aspect. Even with regular things such as a BFT validator, of having it in your app chain network, the only way to get security through decentralization is to having a large enough validator set. People are charging from anywhere from 5,000, you're lucky if you get somebody charging you 5,000 for a validator per month, all the way to $15,000 per month. Of course, even if you have POS, while your token is worth nothing on the market, you need to have a way to pay the validators in fiat. This amounts, if you really want to have a secure network, you need to have Byzantine fault tolerance. Most commonly, the consensus mechanism we developed for Edge, IBFT 2.0, needs a minimum of 4 validators to be able to tolerate any kind of failure, both Byzantine and crash. And this amounts to 20 to 60K per month. For startups, this is unimaginable. You need funding just to be started with your app chain. For enterprises who are not saying, look, I know I will have this in production for the next 3 years, but they're budgeting for projects that they need to carefully examine what kind of revenue benefit can it bring to their organization. These projects get drowned before they even show value because you're spending 60K a month just on infrastructure. Compare this to a life of a Web2 startup, somebody who's building everything on AWS, GCP, Azure. They're being thrown cloud credits at simply because everybody thinks that they will be a high-paying customer in the future. They are taking a bet that this startup will, in the end, become a huge lifetime value customer for AWS, for example. In Web3, we just don't have that. There's a huge gap in what startups and enterprises face between starting with their needed infrastructure and tooling in Web 2 versus Web 3. If you take a look at the cost of decentralizing, that's just shy of $500,000 per year so that you can have the essential infrastructure to really call yourself a Web 3 network. That's not good. But I want to answer why is it like that, how we came to this point, and what lessons can we learn from Ethereum. I'd argue that it's all because of how Web3 protocols evolve and the slow process that they had towards it. I think the best thing to do is to turn back and look at the most recent and, in my opinion, the biggest event in evolution of Web3 networks, which was Ethereum's transition from proof of work to proof of stake. Uh, it's one thing I'd like to make clear right off the bat is that I don't want to even tackle the energy efficiency, some might argue, greenwashing aspect of all of it. No, I think that's a good counter argument to everybody attacking the Web3 industry. With Web3, we've got this nice thing that we can correctly estimate how much power per year does a network consume. Nobody asks the question, how much does this bank consume? How much does this entertainment service consume? And I don't think it's a good argument to be even getting into, because proof of stake is not an effort to improve energy efficiency. It's excellent that it did that, but if we just stop there, we are simply giving the counter argument. What I would argue instead is that movement from proof of work as the instrument for securing the network to proof of stake is simply an effort not to depend on large external companies which are producing graphics cards such as AMD and NVIDIA. In essence, the sole output of the product of these companies is what made Ethereum secure. Of course, it was the thousands of miners and mining farms and everything, but if we cut off the supply from AMD and NVIDIA, essentially Ethereum would be rendered insecure because the hashing power would be dropping dramatically. With the movement to proof of stake, some might argue, okay, but we are still at risks of centralized liquid staking, derivatives that are securing the network, but we are all being scared by it. No, Lido isn't NVIDIA. Lido was born out of this industry. Lido has incentives to keep themselves in check, not to become a risk for the network that really let them grow and let them be born into success. I'd say that we must keep that in mind when we're talking about the risks of proof of stake, as it is something that's coming from the industry, is carrying the Web3 spirit forward, and we cannot even compare those two, especially with the rise of the large language models, ChatGPT, OpenAI, and everything. If we were to say that crypto was just a small nuisance for these big hardware manufacturers, it's becoming even a smaller dot on their radar, because suddenly you have this whole new use case that you're going to manufacture GPUs for. And if we start thinking about it, what guarantee do we have that GPUs could even be could even possibly secure networks through proof of work of tomorrow, because they're driven by other motives. And Web3 wasn't the reason people started building graphics cards. So how I really love to explain proof of stake and to talk about it, there's an entire family of proof of stake consensus mechanisms called Ouroboros, which is an ancient symbol for a snake eating its tail, which is a good illustration of how, if we have the result of block production in Ethereum, which is basically ethers being redistributed in the network, if we have the result of block production being the same thing that's securing the network, that's a powerful enough thing that we can call this network completely self-sufficient and completely self-reliable. And that's the point of the entire movement from proof of work to proof of stake. Luckily, we got energy efficiency as an added bonus. So with Ethereum biting its own tail, securing itself by its own products, we see how the evolution of Web3 protocols must take necessary steps, must wait a long time until it can achieve complete self-sufficiency and health. Proof of stake wasn't a new thing. Whoever took a look at Ethereum's roadmap almost 8 years ago, you can then see Vitalik's thoughts on proof of stake. You can see that people are starting to think about it, but people were also very aware that that change cannot happen overnight, not simply because of technical reasons, but because of socioeconomic ones. I want to I want to take a look then forward. We're talking about Ethereum going in the way of L2 scalability, being the base layer for validating all of these proofs, whether they be validity proofs or fraud proofs. But what I truly believe is that even after the L2s scale and help us move the problems somewhere else, we will truly have a multi-chain, many multi-chain ecosystems. Even Vitalik agrees with this. This is a Reddit post where he talked about being optimistic about multi-chain future. But the multi-chain future, coming back to the start of my talk, is currently riddled with really, really huge costs. The BFT validator costing 20 to 40K a month, amounting to $500,000 a year, is something that's very clear in how it prevents both enterprises and startups from entering the scene. One size shouldn't fit all is another problem. Like, if we take a look at some of the coordination points of people building the Ethereum network, such as the Ethereum Magicians Forum, and if you scroll through it, you will see people having lots of different conversations with a majority of them would never go into mainline Ethereum protocol. Majority of them will never see the light of day because a fraction of those are simply people trying to make Ethereum better for themselves. But Ethereum is a public good. Ethereum should be good for everybody and should support as many use cases as possible. If Go Ethereum's issues list on GitHub, 240 issues at the moment of this screenshot, if their issues list has the structure that we had with issues in Polygon Edge, it's mostly people wanting to put in changes that make sense for their use case, even a private deployment of Go Ethereum or something else, where in reality, this is something way bigger than themselves. And I'm telling you this because it's necessary to understand in the app chain thesis that if you want to have your own networks, you cannot just simply go redeploying other networks clients, but you need something that you're able to customize for your own use case. The next thing that I see as a great pitfall to adopting the multi-chain thesis is that people need to start valuing security over decentralization. I've seen projects shoot themselves in the foot, attaining high costs, attaining huge governance and coordination complexity from day one simply because they wanted to say, look, I'm decentralized. Nobody even asked the question, do we have anything to secure worth securing at this moment so that we need to decentralize it from day one? And this gets especially ugly if we're talking about on-chain governance and governance of the validator set. This is the state of the app chain thesis as I see it. People, the majority of people who really want to go maxi on everything Web3 think that you need a huge validator set from day one, but in reality, you would be paying a huge amount of funds, fiat funds, to people who are going to secure a network that has nothing worth securing yet. The key takeaway from this is that decentralization should be done only because of security, not because of decentralization itself. Not so that you can go ahead and state my network is super decentralized, I have this many validators. No, you should know and you should remember why you're doing it in the first place and why was it, why we needed decentralization in the first place. Another point of this argument is, of course, some might argue, but look, there are services right now readily available, infrastructure tooling services that I can go, subscribe, very affordably, spin up as many validators for my own app chain that I need, but the answer is quite simple to why this is not a good idea. We're talking about decentralizing in a way that you have autonomous validators in the validator set. If one company, one blockchain as a service company manages the entire validator set, what's the difference from having a single validator network? There is a difference, but not in security. There's a difference in performance where one validator network, simply because of network messaging complexity, is much more performant than 100 validators managed by a single company. That's why we need to really be aware of why we're decentralizing and how we are approaching the community that's going to help us do it. The second argument towards being hyped up about the novel technologies being made in this space, like roll-up technologies, which are amazing and which are the only way to really scale performance that we know of today. People think that from day one they need to start their app chains with these kind of technologies. These kind of technologies were, again, if we're comparing Web 2 and Web 3, there's this huge, even a very old joke of today about startups who from day one start using Kubernetes. Like, it's not a very smart thing to do. It's going to raise your costs. It's going to raise your manpower costs. And things are going to get very weird very fast when you want to be quick and iterate. What this means in the Web3 context is that a lot of people are starting to build rollups even when they have no users. They're opting in to having huge infrastructure costs. These are really machines that need better and more specialized hardware than typical BFT validators. And it's not always a good thing to think that you're going to have scale at day one, because the costs of having that capacity made possible for rollups may prevent you from even attaining the user base that you are wishing. So start using rollups when you reach adoption and need to scale. Don't use them simply because of novel tech breakthroughs and because you want your pitch deck to look better in front of the VCs. But with all these things, there's a bigger problem, and that problem is that cross-chain communication is inherently very complex and very insecure. We're talking about two disconnected state machines, two disconnected pieces of, two disconnected networks that somehow need to trustlessly relay messages with one another. The bigger problem is that I lied to you a couple of minutes ago with Vitalik's post. I intentionally cropped it to hide the fact that the one reason that Vitalik is scared about the multi-chain future is because we don't see the future of really secure cross-chain bridges happening soon. I'd argue that they are happening, and those solutions lie in the roll-up technologies. But we are not seeing them as bridging solutions, we are seeing them simply as scaling solutions. To illustrate this and how different app chain networks in their ecosystems approach security and approach cross-chain messaging, I want to show you, for example, the TVL graph of a novel app chain network, completely just for illustration purposes. I don't even know the coin that I took a screenshot of for this. So especially in its nascent days, the majority of the network's TVL, if it has bridging enabled with other cross-chain ecosystems, is made out of wrapped tokens that have come from other ecosystems and brought in value. Because the network's native currency doesn't have that much inherent value yet, they're depending on liquidity to come from Ethereum, from other L1s, from other L2s, from other app chains in the ecosystem. So that's all nice and dandy. Your network is responsible for securing a large portion of funds that came from other ecosystems, which have value. Then you take a look at how many POS app chain ecosystems exist now, and how these ecosystems try to secure the network is by saying, okay, you will stake my ecosystem's token that has nothing to do with your network, because your network's token worth nothing. This total value staked is usually much less volatile in value than the value of the total value locked. People can bridge in and out all the time, every day, but rarely in these nascent networks do you see validators staking, unstaking, more delegated stake being pumped into the security pool of the network. And this is an illustration of that, where you have the TVL going up and down, but the total value staked tends to be constant. Does anybody have a hint of why the network is vulnerable in this exact points on the graph? The answer is very clear. If you are talking about the stake being the amount of money making you liable for properly securing the network, these are the times, these peaks above the black line, which signifies the value at stake, these are the times when you're being a fool for properly securing the network. Because if you played against the rules, if you took those stake tokens and exited on Ethereum claiming they were your own, you would have made a profit even with the stake that you are going to lose. And that's a huge problem. We need to make consensus mechanisms that do not count on anybody trying to be fair or playing fair, but being properly punished when they do. And this is no punishment. You can see why. Before staking third-party tokens, the solution to all of this that I see is that before trying to secure your network through third-party tokens, before taking a plunge into somebody else's ecosystem and economies, you really must try to build your own. Because if you have an own economy and you're trying to depend on another ecosystem's token for securing it, you're going to have a bad time and you're going to have those peaks that go over the line where validators are being foolish for being honest. So to recap everything that we talked about, I want to show you the recipe as I see it for a successful app chain. First, you need predictable and affordable costs. You as an organization cannot make that big of a decision without knowing how much it will cost you. You need the ability to make choices, not every size fits all, and I very well know that. Decentralizing because of security is the way to go. You do not need to decentralize from day one, especially if you're not sure you even validated your business model and reached the product market fit with your app chain. Fourth, you want to scale because of lack of throughput. You want to scale because there are these users that cannot find their turn in your blocks to put their transactions, not because you've heard of these new technology that solve the problem for Ethereum, but you're not Ethereum most probably. And last, you want to launch with proper financial incentives so that you can really keep the network secure and help build cross-chain applications and let users move liquidity through different ecosystems. So predictable and affordable costs by facilitating the creation of fair market values. We need a marketplace for validators. We do not want to be in the hands of people who will have a 5,000% markup on the validation costs. We need the ability to make choices. We need to favor the lifetime value of our app chains instead of getting a quick value because of we are accruing value for a larger ecosystem that we have nothing to do with. We need to decentralize because of security, by supporting decentralization but not forcing it. We shouldn't force anything upon anyone, especially when we're talking about budgets and early startups that have not yet reached their product market fits, nor enterprises that are still experimenting. We need to scale because of lack of throughput, not because of tech novelty, not because of our pitch decks. But we need to have a clear path and support so that tomorrow we can adopt these technologies if we succeed enough that there's such a need that we cannot scale otherwise. And we need to launch with proper financial incentives by having the customer success as the one and only incentive. What we're building with Route 3 is we are trying to bring this power of Ethereum that came through the snake eating itself, that came through self-sufficiency, taking careful, small, affordable steps along the way to having a successful network that can scale in the future like Ethereum does. We're creating Route 3. Don't want to shill, but feel free to approach and ask any questions that you might have. Thank you. Any questions? No questions, Your Honor.
Amazing.